Hello, friends. Today is Wednesday, March 2nd, 2022. It's Hump Day. It's Ash Wednesday if you are Catholic, I think. As you can tell, I'm not because I don't know. And I look crazy right now. So I thought that it's been a while since we read our first story, so I figured it's time for the continuation of the alien thingies at the drive-in. So I thought we could read that today. So it's going to be a short video. Return of the Alien Parasites from Outer Space by Angie Hodapp. There's this weird picture here. It's pretty crazy. The night Carl kills Becca Klein, he doesn't sleep. Not even a wink. He lies awake until dawn and then all of the next day. He calls in sick for his shift at the video store. All he can do is stare at the movie posters on his ceiling. They advertise some of his favorites. Millipede hell demons and insatiable slime varmints and TikTok taxidermist. He has always liked those movies, but he knows they're just movies. Now everything is different. If alien parasites from outer space is real, what else is real? He shudders, remembering how it felt to swing the toilet tank lid at Becca's head. The sound of her head hitting the floor, her blood oozing across the dirty tile, her eyelids fluttering, and the soft moans she made as she lay dying. Then he remembers Scary Joe and the ice pick, and Carl mashes a pillow into his face. He can almost talk himself into believing it was Joe, not him, who killed Becca, but he knows she would have died anyway. All Joe did is make sure the parasite in her ear died too. Carl shoots to his feet and dresses quickly, then throws a few things into his backpack. A flashlight, some matches, an extra pair of headphones, and for reasons unknown, Andy Demps's Nebraska cap, the one Becca was wearing last night. The sun is setting, but he can't hide in his room anymore, pretending the alien parasites aren't out there right now infecting the people of Janesburg. He needs a plan. He needs answers. He needs to find Scary Joe. He's coasting down the driveway on his bike, headphones over his ears, cord jack dangling free, before he realizes he doesn't know where Joe lives. He pedals towards town, figuring he has to start somewhere. He has to see the second Alien Parasites movie tonight. The first one showed how the parasites got here, how they infect their hosts, and how their hosts turn into killing machines. The sequel, he guesses, he hopes, will show him how to wipe out the parasites before they can kill anyone else. Now that Joe knows Carl's in on the secret, Carl thinks maybe they can work together. He pedals down Main Street, not sure what he's looking for. He loops around behind the video store so the manager won't see him. He's supposed to be homesick after all. And then turns onto Walnut. He brakes hard. Becca's parents' Jeep Cherokee sits in front of the police station. Through the window, Carl sees Becca's mom sobbing into a handkerchief. Her dad paces the floor. The police chief goes back and forth between them, asking questions and writing down the answers. It's coming up on 24 hours since Becca was last seen, Carl realizes. Her parents are filing a missing persons report. The sun dips below the horizon, and a bruise-colored dusk falls over the town. A hot July breeze stirs up the sound of rustling paper. Carl turns toward a nearby telephone pole where a dozen posters have been thumbtacked and stapled. They're Xeroxed photographs of faces, and every one of them says, "Missing," or "Last seen," or "Have you seen me?" Carl's blood goes cold. He recognizes Mrs. Holtz, his second-grade teacher, Mr. Barringer, the organist at St. Bart's, little Sally Siebert, the 8-year-old sister of one of his classmates, and there, front and center, is Becca Klein, smiling at him exactly the same way she smiled at him last night. Carl figures some of the missing are hosts, others were killed by hosts. Either way, things are just going to get a whole lot worse for Janesburg before they get better. The parasites have been busy, and they're just getting started. One by one, the street lamp's long walnut blink on. A moth bounces off Carl's cheek. He squeals and squats at the air before slapping his hands over his ears. The headphones are still in place. He looks up. Hundreds of moths swarm every street lamp. "Screw you," he shouts. Are they all alien parasites or just some of them? He flips his bike around. There's no time to look for Joe. He hunches over his handlebars and pedals hard to the Meteor drive-in. After a breakneck descent into the crater, he finds the cattle gate at the entrance chained and padlocked just like every Sunday. But taped to the gate is a cardboard sign that says in blocky magic marker letters, "Closed for the season." For the season? Carl sweats and shakes, and not because he just biked his fastest 3 miles ever. How could Joe leave him hanging like this? What could have happened in the last 24 hours to make Joe suddenly decide to close the drive-in for the rest of the summer? He shimmies under the gate, then hustles toward the concession stand and leans against its cool concrete exterior, chest heaving. He listens. It's quiet here. Maybe too quiet. It's dark, too, but Carl's afraid to use his flashlight. Light attracts moths. He creeps toward the front of the building and peeks around the corner. Something hard smashes into his nose. White, hot pain explodes across his face, and he lands on his ass in the dirt. "Returning to the scene of the crime, Kramer," says the voice of Andy Demps. "What the hell did you and Scary Joe do to Becca? Where is she?" Blood streams from Carl's nose over his lips and down his chin. He rolls to his hip and spits. "I asked you a question, Kramer. Scary Joe said Becca's dad came to pick her up last night, but he didn't. And Wade said he saw you go into the girls' bathroom right after Becca said she had to pee. What are you, some kind of pervert? You and that scar-faced freak snatched her from the bathroom, didn't you? And now you have her tied up somewhere. Tell me where she is or I'll rip your balls off." "It wasn't like that. You gotta trust me." Carl squints up at Andy, the pain in his face settling into a dull throb that's worse than the punch itself. Andy swats at the air and mutters, "Fucking moths." "Shit." Carl shrugs out of his backpack, unzips it, and digs out the extra headphones. "Put these on." "What?" He swats again. "Put the damn headphones on, Andy, or one of those moths is going to fly into your ear and you're going to end up like Becca." Andy stares down at Carl. Then slowly, to Carl's surprise, he takes the headphones and fits them over his ears. When he speaks again, his voice is dangerously low. "What do you mean, end up like Becca?" Carl knows he can't hit Andy with too much truth right now, or he'll end up getting punched again. Eyes watering, he wipes his bloodied nose with the back of his hand. "I don't know where Becca is." Not a lie. He doesn't know what Scary Joe did with her body. "I came here to get some answers. Are you with me?" Andy stares, his expression twitching from confusion and disgust to fear and resignation. Finally, he offers Carl a hand. Carl takes it and lets Andy pull him to his feet. "Lead the way, weirdo." Carl slings his backpack over his shoulder and moves along the front of the concession stand. He rattles the aluminum shutter that's rolled down over the service window, but it's locked tight. "Let's check out the dumpster." "Why the hell do you think Becca's in the dumpster?" Carl doesn't answer, but there's a smell in the air now. A smell that's more than trash. A smell that's getting stronger the closer they get to the dumpster. He swallows and keeps moving. He peeks around the corner. There, in the moonlight, sitting with his back against the dumpster, is Scary Joe. "Is he dead?" Andy says. Heart hammering, Carl pulls his flashlight from his backpack. He has no choice. He'll only use it for a couple of seconds, not long enough to attract many moths. He switches it on and aims at Joe. Carl hasn't eaten all day, but that doesn't stop his gut from bucking. Behind him, Andy lets out a string of cuss words. Scary Joe is dead. His chin is slumped to his chest. Blood cakes the side of his face. It came from his ear, Carl realized. So much of it that his shoulder and one side of his wife beater got drenched. In one hand, Scary Joe clutches a bloody ice pick. Did he do that to himself? Andy's voice goes soprano. Jesus, why the hell would he do that to himself? He got a moth in his ear, a parasite. He knew he had to kill it before it made him kill other people. The closed for the season sign on the cattle gate means after Joe realized he'd been infected, the first thing he did was try to keep people away from here, away from alien parasite ground zero. Then he killed himself to protect others from the parasite's murderous urges. In Carl's book, that made Scary Joe a damn hero. You mean like the movie last night, Andy says? That's crazy, Kramer. That was just a movie. No, it was a warning. Joe told me the parasites come out every 10 years and turn people into mindless killers. Those two guys in the movie, Stan and Sam? Stan is Joe, and Sam is Jasper Reed, the director. Jasper made the movie to document what happened to them in high school and warn people that it would happen again. Andy claps his hands over the headphones on his ears. Is that what happened to Becca? Carl swallows. Try not to think about that right now. Well, what do we do? There's a sequel. We have to watch it so we know how to fight back. Carl switches off the flashlight. Holding his breath, he crouches and unclips Joe's keyring from his belt. There's something in his other ear, Andy says. Sure enough, a shining white in the moonlight, a soft ball-sized thing balloons out of Scary Joe's unbloodied ear. Egg sack. Get a stick. We're at the bottom of a crater. There aren't any sticks down here. Then grab the ice pick. Carl feels around inside his backpack for his matches. Why do I have to do it? Forget it. I'll do it. A surge of pleasure bolsters Carl's confidence. Andy Demp's Pride of Janesburg High's offensive line is a squeamish sissy. Realizing this, and realizing Andy knows Carl knows it, almost makes getting sucker punched worth it. Carl takes the ice pick and gently pokes at the egg sac. He's careful not to puncture it. Who knows how many baby alien parasites are in there and what growth stage they're in. He pokes harder. Hard to say how far it goes in, but it feels rooted pretty deep. A couple more pokes and a little levering and the sac pulls loose. It bounces off Joe's shoulder, trailing bloody, fibrous tendrils and lands in the dirt. Carl lights a match and throws it on the sack. It goes up fast, emitting a high-pitched screech, the collective death wail of its tiny inhabitants. Carl keeps throwing lit matches until it's nothing but ashes. 3 matches left. He slips them back into the pocket of his jeans. Andy steps past Carl and stomps on the ashes. Gee, Andy, good thing you're here. Shut up, Andy mumbles. Come on, let's find the sequel. The boys jog toward the corrugated metal shack that serves as the Meteor's projection booth. Carl flips the keys on Joe's ring, fumbling through several in the dark before he finds the right one. The lock clicks and the door swings open. Carl waits for Andy to close the door before switching on his flashlight. The projector sits in the center of the room. Along the walls are crooked stacks of film reel canisters, hundreds and hundreds of them, titles scrawled in blue marker on yellowed strips of masking tape. Carl's heart sinks. This is going to take forever. They don't have forever. Right now, the parasites are out there infecting the people of Janesburg, and they have to be stopped. Andy grabs one of the canisters. Jungle Brides of the Zulu Zombie King? Is this shit for real? What are we looking for anyway? Look for anything with alien or parasite or outer space in the title. He props the flashlight against the projector so its beam points straight up, making the whole shack evenly dim. Looking around, he spies a stack of old rusty reels that aren't in canisters. The film is old, really old, celluloid old. Damn, Joe. Andy jumps. What is it? What'd you find? Fire hazard. Carl shakes his head at Joe's carelessness. It's a marvel those reels didn't spontaneously combust decades ago. Everyone at the video store knew Joe was a vintage film collector, but apparently the guy didn't care much about preservation or safety. Carl starts flipping through a stack of canisters. He's only 5 or 6 deep when Andy shouts, I found it! He holds up a canister like it's a WWF championship belt. Queen of the alien parasites from outer space. Fuck. Andy gloats. Mad I found it before you? No moron, there's a queen. Oh, yeah, that sounds bad. Carl tosses Joe's keys to Andy. Open the projection window. He pops the lid off the canister and fits the reel onto the projector. You know how to work that thing? Andy says. Demps, your sorry ass is about to be saved by the president of the AV Club. Andy makes a grunting sound that Carl thinks might have been a laugh. As soon as Andy slides the window open, Carl flips on the projector. The boys stare at the screen off in the distance, now flickering bright and counting down from 3, 2. The first shot is a wide-angle view of Janesburg. People line both sides of Main, waving and cheering as a parade passes by. The grinning fire chief tosses candy from the cab of Engine 1. Then come banner-carrying representatives of the Kiwanis Club, the Rotary Club, the VFW, the High School Marching Band, Future Farmers of America, the Janesburg Founders Day Parade. Andy says, "Shh." Carl's concentrating. He can tell by the clothes and the hairstyles of the extras in the crowd that this movie was shot about a decade after the first, yet when the camera cuts to Sam and Stan, who watch the parade from a second-story window, they're still teenagers. They're being played by different actors now, but Stan's head is wrapped in bandages, and what can be seen of his skin is covered in fake silly putty scars. Carl can also tell Jasper Reed didn't make this film. The shots are shorter, jumpier. The angles aren't as refined. "Joe," thinks Carl, "is this your movie?" On screen, Sam and Stan crouch below the sill of their window and watch a swarm of moths descend on Main Street. Many cheerful expressions turn to annoyance as the townspeople swat at the moths. Their faces go slack. What follows is a bloodbath. The infested turn on their friends, families, neighbors, and choke, bludgeon, and stab. The fire chief drives Engine 1 into a crowd of terrified bystanders, pulping some beneath his tires, crushing others against the side of the post office. Soon the only people left standing are those controlled by parasites. Placid now, they fall in line and walk single file down the center of the street. Wobbly close-ups show egg sacs hanging from their ears. Back to Sam and Stan. Sam swats at the side of his face and digs a finger into his ear. A close-up of Stan's horrified eyes switches to a close-up of Stan's scarred hand clutching an ice pick. Eyes, ice pick, eyes, ice pick. An egg sac billows from Sam's ear. Stan raises the ice pick, but can't bring himself to land the blow. Sam rises and calmly exits the room. From the window, Stan watches Sam walk out into the street and join the parasite parade. "If all this happened, why doesn't anyone in town remember?" Andy whispers. "I don't know, maybe they meant it to be an allegory or something?" "What's an allegory?" "A story that cuts to the point, like you're not supposed to take it literally." "Oh, well, where are they going?" Carl's pretty sure he knows. A queasy feeling turns his stomach. On screen, Stan runs into the street. Ears bandaged, he tiptoes after the mindless town people, keeping his distance. Sure enough, they make their way to a giant meteor crater at the edge of town. "Is that this crater?" Andy squeaks. "I mean, shit! Is that where we are right now?" "You know a different crater outside Janesburg? Now shut up, this is where we learn what to do." The townspeople stand at the crater's edge. The ground at the bottom of the crater quakes and cracks and splits apart. A giant black wing the size of a barn door unfolds from the ground. Then another. 2 shiny forelegs follow, joints clicking and clacking. The Queen. Slowly she climbs from her subterranean nest, a massive moth-like alien nightmare. She shakes out hairy black antennae, each some 5 or 6 feet long. Fully emerged, she stands as tall as the crater is deep. Rearing up on her hind legs, she uncurls a spindly proboscis. One by one, she plucks the egg sacs from the townspeople's ears and tucks them into a pouch in her abdomen. One by one, the townspeople fall dead, their purpose served. That's how this all works, Carl realizes. He's not queasy anymore, he's fascinated, resolute. Every 10 years, the Queen collects her eggs. For a decade, she incubates them. Then they hatch, and this whole cycle begins again. The only way to break this cycle is to kill the Queen. On screen, Sam is the last to fall. Stan steps to the edge of the crater and lets out a primal scream. The Queen swings her head around, ready to face him. He's ready to do battle. He's ready to... The ground beneath the projection shack bucks, sending Carl and Andy sprawling against the door. The projector pitches off its stand and crashes to the floor. With a crunch of breaking glass, the drive-in goes dark. "Fuck!" Andy shouts. "She's here!" Carl scrambles toward the projector and yanks on the rail, but it's stuck. The shack bucks again, harder this time. No, no, no. This film is the only way to know how to fight the Queen. Kramer, we have to get out of here. "The concession stand," Carl shouts, pulling himself to his feet. "It's concrete. It's our best chance. You still have Joe's keys?" Andy holds up the keys, then slams open the door and takes off at a sprint. Carl moves to follow, but a third tremor rocks the flimsy shack. He slides like a bowling ball into Joe's vintage film reels, which crash and clatter down around him. A rusty reel rolls across the slanted floor, unspooling a long, curling strip of ancient celluloid. Celluloid. Carl! Andy's voice is frantic and far away. Some shadowy corner of Carl's brain registers that this is the first time Andy Demps has ever called him Carl, not Kramer, and he knows there's something kind of significant about that, like maybe they're becoming friends, but right now, a much bigger part of his brain is spinning and spinning. He has an idea. Celluloid concession stand. He has more than an idea. He has a plan. Open the concession stand window! Carl screams into the darkness. Groping along the floor, he grabs an armful of vintage film reels. 6 or 7 of them. He hopes that that's enough. He leaps out the door just as the shack heaves again, then collapses behind him like a crushed soda can. He lands straddling a massive crack in the ground, a crack that's getting wider and longer. It's one of many cracks, he realizes, and they're all getting wider and longer, spreading out like jagged lightning from behind him where the shack used to be. Slowly he turns. A black wing emerges from beneath the wreckage of the shack, an oily black membrane unfurling like the sail of some demonic hell ship. Carl can't breathe. He can't move. He can't even remember how. She's here. The Queen, just like in the movie. No, worse than in the movie. Much, much worse. The clicking and clacking of massive insectile joints snaps him into action. He runs. He runs faster than he's ever run before, backpack thumping against his bony shoulder blades. He leaps over cracks, anticipating the shift and tilt of the ground as it pitches beneath his feet. He's not running away from the Queen. He's running around her, zigzagging as he goes, flinging old film out behind him like party streamers. "What are you doing?" Andy yells from the open window of the concession stand. "Get your ass in here!" Carl ignores him. He's almost out of film, but that's okay because he's almost made a full circuit. A second wing emerges. He slings the last of the film over his shoulder, tosses the empty reel, and sprints towards the concession stand. Andy holds the door open for him, then slams it and locks the deadbolt. Either you're completely crazy or that little joy run was some part of a brilliant plan. Brilliant plan, Carl says, chest heaving. He grabs 3 large soda cups and sets them upright on the counter. His eyes sweep over the candy rack on the back wall. Twizzlers, Milk Duds, Whoppers, Gobstoppers, Junior Mints, his favorite, and perfect. He snatches all the Sour Patch Kids. Like this, he tells Andy. He dumps 3 whole bags into one of the cups, then mashes the candy down with his fist. He pokes a finger into the center of the sugary mass and stuffs a napkin in the hole. Andy glances out at the Queen, now using her forelegs to haul her semi-trailer-sized thorax out of the ground. Sour Patch Kids, napkins, right, whatever you say. Carl flings open the cabinet under the soda dispenser and yanks out all the rubber tubing. The CO2 tank tips and rolls out of the cabinet on to the top of Carl's foot, but he barely feels the pain. He selects the longest piece of tubing and tests its stretch, then eyes the aluminum tracks bracketed to either side of the window. "What now?" says Andy. Carl points at the jug of Wesson cooking oil next to the popcorn maker. "Soak the napkins." Andy nods, understanding now. "Fucking righteous!" He snags the jug, unscrews the cap, and starts tipping oil into the cups. Carl's cheeks flush, but the Queen's third set of legs is now scrabbling out of the broken, churned-up ground, so he tells himself there will be plenty of time to be proud later after he kills the Queen. Fingers fumbling, he knots one end of the tubing to the track, then stretches it across the window and ties off the other end. Praying, he pulls the tubing back like a bowstring and lets go. The knots hold. The tubing snaps taut with a satisfying thwack. Showtime. "We should be making like 100 of these," Andy says. Carl pulls the matchbook from his back pocket and tosses it to Andy. "Only 3 matches left. Let's make 'em count." Andy lights a match and drops it into the first cup. The oily napkin ignites. A second later, the sugar-coated candy begins to burn. Suddenly, they have the Queen's full attention. Her colossal head swings toward them. The candy bomb's tiny flame is reflected 1,000,000 times in her scaly black eyes. Heart-thumping, Carl pulls the cup against the tubing, aims, and releases. It hits the ground a good 20 yards short of the Queen. The flame burns out in a sad little wisp of smoke. Jesus, Kramer! Andy lights another match and drops it into the second cup. What are you aiming for? The celluloid. Carl squints at the shiny ribbons of film that crisscross the ground in a giant ring around the queen. He takes candy bomb number 2 and holds his breath. This time, he pulls the tubing back a little harder. Holding his breath, he lets go. This one, too, falls short and burns out. The queen's antenna swish and flick. She hunches, her clickety-clackety legs clicking and clacking. It's a defensive posture if Carl ever saw one. She's figured it out. The cell you what? The old film. It's highly flammable. That was your plan? Andy looks like he's not sure he should waste the last match, the last flaming candy bomb, or on Carl's poor decisions. Give it to me, Carl says. I've got the feel of it now. I'll make it count. Maybe Andy realizes that trusting Carl has gotten him this far. Maybe he's just plain scared he couldn't do any better. Or maybe it's because Andy's a football player and respects the potential glory of a good Hail Mary. Whatever the reason, Andy crosses himself, lights the final match, and hands Carl the last candy bomb. Carl knocks the bomb against the tubing. He stares straight into the queen's gigantic, faceted eyes. Die, you alien parasite bitch. He lets go. The celluloid ring goes up in a flash, a silo of fire rising up around the queen. She rears up on her hind legs, a deafening screech tearing out of whatever orifice approximates a throat. With a mighty leap, she takes to the sky, massive wings beating wind into the hot night air. And then she's gone. The celluloid rings burn out nearly as fast as it went up. Once again, the night is dark and silent. Well, Carl says, that didn't go exactly like I'd hoped. Are you shitting me, man? She's gone! We're still alive! Carl hears genuine admiration in Andy's voice, but this is a minor victory. She'll be back. Maybe she'll build a nest somewhere else. Either way, we're probably the only 2 people in the world to know she exists. It's up to us to warn people. How? We do what Jasper and Scary Joe did. We make a movie. Carl reaches into his backpack and pulls out Andy's Nebraska cap. You in, Demps? Andy swallows hard. For a moment, the boys are silent, staring at the cap and thinking about a girl they both loved. Then Andy takes his cap and pulls it onto his head. Yeah, Kramer, I'm in. And that is the end of The Return of the Alien Parasites from Outer Space, written by Angie Hodapp. I will have the information about the book and the story in the description below. The next story, I will probably try to do a Wednesday story every week. The next story is called Negative Creep, and I will read that next week. I hope everyone has a lovely day, and I'll talk to y'all soon.